Millionaire CEO asked his maid for a child. She gave him everything, then he left without a word. I want you to have my child. The words hung in the air like heat. Lena stared at Cameron West, the billionaire who had barely acknowledged her existence for years. You mean, adoption? She whispered. No, I mean you. I want you to have my child. But what happened next shattered everything she thought she knew about trust, love, and the price of giving someone everything. Welcome back to Mr. Ashbourne Golden Narrative, where share stories that don't just entertain, but transform how we see love, trust, and human connection. To my incredible subscribers who keep coming back for these powerful stories, thank you. Your support, your comments, your shares, they fuel every story I tell. And if you're new here, you're about to discover why this community is so special. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our storytelling family. Now, let's get back to the story. The marble floors of the West Estate had witnessed generations of secrets. But none quite like this. Lena Maris moved through the grand hallways with the kind of grace that only comes from a lifetime of practice. Every step was measured, every gesture purposeful. She had been polishing these floors since she was old enough to hold a cloth, first alongside her mother, then alone after tragedy struck. Mama, why do we have to be so quiet? 7-year-old Lena had once asked, her small voice echoing in the vast kitchen. Miriam Maris had knelt down, adjusting her daughter's tiny uniform. Because, my love, we're the invisible threads that hold this house together. We're important, but we're not the center. Remember that. Those words had shaped everything. At 25, Lena had become the invisible thread her mother described. She knew Cameron West's morning routine better than he did. Coffee at 7:15, black with 1 sugar. She knew he favored his left side when he slept because the pillows were always displaced that way. She knew he wrote thank you notes to the landscaping crew every Christmas in his careful, measured handwriting. But Cameron West didn't know her favorite color. He didn't know she hummed while she worked, or that she read voraciously in her small quarters, or that she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher before duty called her home. He knew her as Lena, the housekeeper, Miriam's daughter. Nothing more. Good morning, Mr. West, she would say each day as he passed through the kitchen. He would nod. A single, brief acknowledgement that somehow meant everything and nothing at all. That nod was their entire relationship. Professional. Distant. Safe. Cameron West was Atlanta's golden boy, 32 years old and worth more than most small countries. The tech company he'd built from his dorm room had revolutionized how people connected across the globe. Ironic, considering how disconnected he was from the people in his own home. To the world he was polished perfection. Magazines featured him on their covers. Business leaders sought his advice. Women threw themselves at his feet. But Lena saw the man behind the mask. She saw how his hands trembled slightly when he was stressed. She noticed the way he stared out the window during thunderstorms, lost in thoughts he never shared. She heard the nights he couldn't sleep, pacing the floors above her room. She knew him in ways that mattered. And he had no idea. The rhythm of their lives was predictable, comfortable even. He was upstairs. She was downstairs. He made decisions. She made them happen. He lived his life. She maintained it. Until the day the rhythm shattered. It started with silence. Not the usual quiet. Cameron had never been loud, but something deeper. His morning coffee sat untouched. His newspaper lay folded, unread. The sound of his dress shoes on marble, once as regular as clockwork, became sporadic, uncertain. Lena noticed everything. It was her job to notice. She saw how he gripped the edge of the kitchen counter one morning, knuckles white as if the marble was the only thing keeping him upright. She noticed how he stood at the window longer than usual, staring at nothing. She heard him come home one evening and sit in his car for an hour, engine off, just sitting. But she never asked. It wasn't her place. The truth revealed itself the way truth always does, accidentally, quietly, devastatingly. She found the prescription bottle while emptying the wastebasket in his study. It had fallen behind the trash can, forgotten. The name on the label made her pause, Cameron West. The medication name meant nothing to her at first glance. But later, alone in her room, she searched it. Clomiphene. Male infertility treatment. The man who seemed to have everything, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was fighting a battle that money couldn't win. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. All those distant stares, the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd been carrying himself like a man bearing an invisible weight. He was afraid, vulnerable, human, and completely alone. That night, she lay awake thinking about the boy she'd served breakfast to during his senior year of high school. The young man who'd left for college without a backward glance. The billionaire who'd returned for his father's funeral and looked through her as if she were part of the furniture. Now she understood. Power, success, control, it was all armor. And underneath he was just a man desperate for something real. Something that couldn't be bought or built or commanded into existence. Something like family. The next evening he called her name. Not through the intercom. Not by leaving a note. His actual voice, carrying through the hallways like a prayer. Lena. She appeared in the doorway of his study, hands folded, heart racing for reasons she couldn't name. He didn't look up immediately. Just stared out the window as if the words he needed were written somewhere in the darkness. I need to talk to you, he said finally. She waited. Please, he added, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sit. That single word, please, changed everything. The study felt smaller with both of them in it. Cameron's usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by something raw and uncertain. Lena sat straight-backed in the leather chair, her hands folded in her lap, watching him struggle with words that seemed too heavy for his tongue. I've been thinking about legacy, he began, then stopped. Started again. About what happens when everything I've built, when I'm gone. Lena remained silent, giving him space to find his way. I want a child, he said finally, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for months. I've run every test, consulted every specialist. I have maybe 6 months before. He paused, swallowing hard. Before it becomes nearly impossible. Her heart clenched, but her expression didn't change. I've considered surrogacy, legal contracts, clinical procedures, but it all feels so. He searched for the word. Empty. Like I'm manufacturing something that should be sacred. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw desperation bleeding through his carefully constructed walls. You're the only person I trust, Lena. The only person who's been constant in my life. Who's seen me at my worst and never judged. Never asked for anything in return. The words she'd been dreading came next. I want you to have a chasm. Lena felt the world tilt, her carefully ordered existence cracking at the foundation. You mean adoption? She asked carefully. No. His voice was steady now, sure. I mean you. I want you to carry my child. To be the mother. She stood abruptly, not in anger but in shock. Mr. West, Cameron, he interrupted. Please. Just, Cameron. But she couldn't. The name felt too intimate, too dangerous. Using it would mean crossing a line she'd spent her entire life respecting. I need time, she said instead. Of course. Take all the time you need. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Something in his tone, in the way he'd said please, made her turn back. You know I grew up in this house, she said quietly. I know. I used to serve you breakfast in your senior year of high school. You never even looked up from your cereal. He blinked, surprised. I watched you leave for college. Heard about your success from the staff before I ever heard your voice again. When you came back for your father's funeral, you looked right through me like I was invisible. His jaw tightened. And now, she continued, her voice steady but weighted with years of accumulated pain, you want me to give you the most precious thing I have. To carry your child. To change my entire life. Because you trust me. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I didn't realize you remembered all that, he said quietly. I remember everything, Mr. West. That's the job. She saw him flinch at the formal address. Do you hate me for asking? He whispered. Lena studied his face, the vulnerability there, the genuine fear of her answer. For the first time since she'd known him, Cameron West looked like a man who could be hurt. I don't hate you, she said finally. But I need you to understand something. I'm not furniture. I'm not a convenient solution to your problem. I'm a person with feelings, dreams, fears. And what you're asking, it's not just about a child. It's about me. She straightened her shoulders. Next time you ask someone to change their entire life, maybe don't approach it like a business proposition. Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. What would you have said in Lena's position? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're invested in this story, hit that like button. That night, rain swept across Atlanta like judgment. Cameron found himself on the rooftop garden, a place he'd always gone to think. The city lights blurred through the storm, and for the first time in years he felt small. He thought about what Lena had said. About being invisible. About serving him breakfast while he ignored her existence. The truth of it cut deeper than any business failure ever had. He remembered that New Year's Eve months ago. She'd brought food to the rooftop for his small gathering, but the guests had left early. She'd stayed to clean up, moving quietly among the abandoned champagne glasses and party favors. "You don't have to do this now," he'd said. "It's New Year's." She'd looked up, surprised he'd spoken to her directly. "It's fine, Mr. West. I don't mind." But she'd stayed longer than necessary, standing at the edge of the terrace, watching the fireworks paint the sky in gold and silver. In that moment, with the city celebration reflecting in her eyes, he'd seen her. Really seen her. Not as the housekeeper. Not as Miriam's daughter. But as Lena. A woman with her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own quiet beauty. The realization had terrified him. So he'd looked away, dismissed the moment, buried it under the familiar weight of distance and control. Now he understood. He hadn't just asked her to have his child. He'd asked her to trust him with everything while offering nothing in return. He'd treated her like a solution instead of a person. He'd failed her before he'd even begun. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Lena sat on her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the rain streaming down her window. She wasn't naive. She'd been proposed to before, awkward attempts from delivery drivers, colleagues, even one of the landscapers who'd worked up the courage to ask her to dinner. But this was different. This wasn't about love or romance or even attraction. This was about need. Desperation. The kind of raw vulnerability that scared her more than any declaration of love ever could. Because she knew something Cameron didn't understand about himself. She knew he wasn't just asking for a child. He was asking for connection. For someone to anchor him to something real and lasting and meaningful. And terrifyingly, impossibly, she wanted to be that person. Not because she loved him, not in the fairy tale way the world expected, but because she understood him. She'd watched him navigate triumph and tragedy, success and loss. She'd seen him at his most human, even when he didn't know anyone was watching. She respected him, trusted him, felt safe in his presence in a way she'd never felt safe with anyone. But there was something else. Something she'd never told anyone, never even admitted to herself until this moment. She'd never been with anyone. Never kissed, never been touched, never shared that kind of intimacy. Not from fear or religious conviction, but because she'd been waiting to feel truly safe. Waiting for someone who would see her, value her, treat her like she mattered. And somehow, impossibly, that person was Cameron West. The man who'd ignored her for years was the same man who made her feel most seen. The billionaire who lived in a different world was the one who felt most like home. The contradiction should have been laughable. Instead, it was heartbreaking. Because she was about to say yes. And she knew he had no idea what that yes would really cost her. 5 days passed in careful choreography. Cameron didn't press. Lena didn't avoid. They moved around each other like dancers who knew the steps but not the music. On the 6th night, she left a note on his desk. Simple. Direct. Written in her careful handwriting. Tonight. Rooftop. 10 p.m. Just us. No signature. No explanation. Just an invitation that felt like a verdict. Cameron found the note at 8 p.m. By 9:30, he was pacing the rooftop like a man awaiting execution. The Atlanta skyline glittered below, but he couldn't focus on anything except the sound of his own heartbeat. At exactly 10 p.m. she appeared. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair down instead of pulled back in its usual professional style. No makeup, no jewelry. Just Lena, stripped of the armor of formality. "Thank you for coming," she said, though they both knew he wouldn't have dared to be anywhere else. "I wasn't sure you'd really be here," he replied. "That makes 2 of us." They stood facing each other across the small table, the city lights creating a backdrop for the most important conversation of their lives. "I've made my decision," she said. Cameron's breath caught. "Okay. I'll do it." Relief flooded his features, but she held up a hand. "But not for the reasons you think. Not for legacy or convenience or because I'm a convenient solution." She stepped closer, her voice steady but weighted with meaning. "I'll do it because I trust you. Because I've lived in this house long enough to know you wouldn't ask unless it mattered. Because I've seen you at your worst and your best, and I believe you're a good man who's forgotten how to be vulnerable." He started to speak, but she continued. "But you need to understand something, Cameron. I don't give the use of his first name stopped him. I can't separate body from soul, can't treat this like a transaction. If I do this, if I give you this, it's all of me. Everything." Her eyes held his steadily. "I've never been with anyone. Never kissed, never been touched, never shared that kind of intimacy. You would be my first. My only." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Lena, I need you to understand what that means," she interrupted gently. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for promises or forever. But I need you to know that what you're asking for, it's not just about a child. It's about me trusting you with the most sacred part of myself. Cameron felt something shift in his chest. The clinical nature of his request, the businesslike approach he'd taken, it all crumbled in the face of her honesty. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why me? Because you're the only person I've ever felt safe with, she said simply. Even when you didn't see me, even when you looked through me like I was invisible, I felt safe in your presence. And that's not something I can manufacture or logic away. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and terror. If we do this, Cameron said finally, I want to honor it. All of it. This isn't just about what I need anymore. She nodded once. Then show me. If this story is touching your heart, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. They didn't rush. The transition from the rooftop to her quarters felt like a sacred procession. Cameron had never been in her private space, a modest but beautiful room that smelled of lavender and felt like peace. She moved with quiet grace, folding back the covers, lighting a single candle. Not for romance but for warmth. For humanity in a moment that could have felt clinical. Are you sure? He asked one final time. Instead of answering with words, she reached for his hand. Her fingers were steady, sure. She guided him to sit on the edge of the bed, then stood before him. I'm sure, she said. But I need you to be present. Not the CEO, not the billionaire. Just Cameron. Just the man. He looked up at her and for the first time in years, felt the weight of his own humanity. I don't know if I remember how to be just a man. Then let me show you, she said softly. What happened next wasn't the passionate explosion of a romance novel. It was tender, uncertain, profound. Cameron touched her like he was learning a new language. Lena responded not with performance but with trust, opening herself to him in ways that went far beyond the physical. They moved together like people discovering something sacred. Every kiss was a question. Every touch was an answer. Every breath was a prayer neither of them had words for. When it was over, they lay in the darkness, not speaking. Cameron's arm around her waist, Lena's head on his chest. Both of them changed in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For what? For trusting me with this. With your body, your virginity. She pressed closer, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. Don't make me regret it. I won't, he promised. I swear to you I won't. But promises made in the dark have a way of crumbling in the light. When Lena woke the next morning, she was alone. The space beside her was cold, empty. No note, no explanation. Just the faint scent of his cologne and the devastating silence of abandonment. She sat up slowly, wrapping the sheet around herself, staring at the empty pillow where his head had been. The candle had burned down to nothing, leaving only a pool of wax and the bitter taste of betrayal. He was gone. And she was exactly where she'd always been, alone, invisible, forgotten. But this time she'd given him everything. And he'd taken it and disappeared like it meant nothing. The sound that escaped her throat wasn't quite a sob. It was deeper than that. It was the sound of trust breaking, of hope dying, of a woman realizing she'd been a fool to believe in fairy tales. She stood, walked to the window and looked out at the estate grounds. The same grounds she'd walked as a child, dreaming of a life where she mattered. Where she was seen. Nothing had changed. She was still invisible. But now she was invisible and broken. Days of silence passed like a death. Cameron returned a week later, his footsteps echoing through the marble halls with their usual authority. But something was different. The house felt too clean, too quiet. Like someone had scrubbed away more than dust. He found his coffee mug in its usual spot, washed and dried and placed exactly where he always left it. His morning routine intact, perfect, untouched by the earthquake that had shaken both their lives. But Lena was different. She moved through the house like a ghost of herself, present but not there, efficient but distant. When she passed him in the hallway there was no nod, no greeting. Just empty air where connection used to be. He waited for her to say something. To acknowledge what had happened. To give him an opening to explain, to apologize, to make it right. She gave him nothing. Good morning, Lena, he said on the fourth day when she brought his coffee. Good morning, Mr. West, she replied, setting down the cup without looking at him. Mr. West. The formal address hit him like a slap. We need to talk, he said. She paused, turned halfway. About what, sir? Sir. Even worse. About the other night. Was there something wrong with the service? She asked, her voice perfectly neutral. The question was a knife. You know what I mean. I'm afraid I don't. Was there an issue with dinner? Or perhaps the laundry? He stared at her, recognizing the game but not knowing how to play it. She was forcing him to name what had happened between them, to claim it, to make it real. Lena, please? If there's nothing else, Mr. West, I have work to do. She turned to leave, but he caught her arm. Gently but firmly. Don't do this, he said. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Do what? Pretend it didn't happen. I'm not pretending anything, she said, pulling free. I'm simply maintaining appropriate boundaries between employer and employee. That's not what we are, he said desperately. Isn't it? Her voice was calm, controlled. What are we then, Mr. West? He opened his mouth, but no words came. Because he didn't know. He hadn't thought past the moment, past the need, past the desperate desire for connection. I see, she said, nodding. Then we're exactly what we've always been. And I need to get back to work. She walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway like a man who'd forgotten his own name. Cameron is learning that some mistakes can't be fixed with words. What do you think he should do? Let me know in the comments, and if you're feeling the tension, give this video a like. The pattern continued for weeks. Professional distance. Polite formality. A careful dance around the truth that sat between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Cameron tried everything. Flowers appeared on her desk. She distributed them around the house like decorations. Expensive gifts were left in her quarters. She donated them to charity. He even tried cooking breakfast himself, a disaster that filled the kitchen with smoke and left him more frustrated than ever. Nothing worked. She was unreachable, untouchable, protected by walls he'd helped her build. Then, on a Saturday morning, storage closet when he saw it, a small white pharmacy bag tucked behind some linens. He wouldn't have noticed it, shouldn't have touched it, but something about the way it was hidden made him pause. Inside were two things that stopped his world. A pregnancy test box. Empty. An appointment slip from Atlanta Women's Clinic with Lena's name and yesterday's date. The bag slipped from his fingers as the reality hit him. She was pregnant, carrying his child. And she hadn't said a word. She'd been handling this alone, making appointments alone, facing the future alone. Because he'd proven he couldn't be trusted with the most precious thing she'd ever given him. He sank onto the storage bench, head in his hands, drowning in shame and regret. Looking for something? He looked up to find Lena in the doorway, her face calm but her eyes sharp. I didn't mean to, he started. Yes, you did, she said, stepping forward to collect the bag. You meant to snoop. To find out what I wasn't telling you. Are you? The question came out broken. Pregnant. She held his gaze steadily. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you forfeited the right to know when you walked out on me. The words were delivered without malice, but they cut deeper than any scream would have. I was scared, he said. So was I, she replied. But I stayed. I dealt with it. That's the difference between us, Cameron. When you're afraid, you run. When I'm afraid, I handle it. She turned to leave, but he called after her. I want to be involved. You want control, she corrected. There's a difference. That's not fair. Fair? She turned back, and for the first time her composure cracked. You asked me to trust you with everything. I did. I gave you my body, my heart, my soul. And you left me like I was nothing. Like it was nothing. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm not angry, Cameron. I'm not bitter. I'm just done hoping you'll be better than you've shown me you are. I can be better, he said desperately. Let me prove it. Prove it to who? She asked. To me? Or to yourself? He didn't answer because he didn't know. I have a prenatal appointment Tuesday, she said finally. If you want to come, you can. But you don't get to speak for me. You don't get to make decisions for me. And you don't get to disappear again. She paused at the door. Because I'm not carrying your child, Cameron. I'm carrying our child. And that baby deserves better than a father who runs when things get real. The door closed behind her with devastating finality, leaving him alone with the weight of his failures and the terrifying possibility of redemption. Tuesday arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the kind of humid heat that made everything feel urgent. Cameron sat in his car outside the women's clinic, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching other couples walk through the doors. They looked excited, nervous, happy. He felt like he was about to face judgment. He'd arrived 30 minutes early, unable to focus on anything else. 3 times he'd started the engine to leave, convinced he didn't deserve to be there. 3 times he'd turned it off, knowing he couldn't abandon her again. At 10:54 he walked through the doors. Cameron West, he told the receptionist. I'm here for Lena Maris. Room 4, she said without looking up. She's already back. Already back. The words hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't waited for him. Hadn't expected him to show up. He found the room, knocked softly, and pushed the door open. Lena looked up from the examination table, wearing a soft gray gown, her hair pulled back simply. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "You came," she said, and he couldn't tell if she was surprised or disappointed. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." He took the chair beside her bed, not too close, not presumptuous. "I'm here now." "Yes," she said quietly. "You are." The technician entered, cheerful and professional, setting up the ultrasound machine with practiced efficiency. Cameron watched Lena's face as the wand moved across her stomach, searching for the life they'd created together. Then they heard it. The heartbeat. Fast, strong, insistent. The sound of life demanding recognition. Cameron felt something break open in his chest. Not pain, but something deeper. Something that had been locked away for so long he'd forgotten it existed. Wonder. "There's your baby," the technician said, pointing to the screen. "About 8 weeks along. Everything looks perfect." Cameron stared at the grainy image, trying to comprehend that the tiny form on the screen was his child. Their child. "Would you like pictures?" the technician asked. "Yes," Lena said softly. "Both of you or just Mom?" Cameron looked at Lena, waiting for her answer. She met his eyes, and for the first time in weeks he saw something other than disappointment there. "Both," she said. The technician handed them each a strip of ultrasound photos. Cameron held his like it was made of glass, staring at the proof of what they'd created. "I'll give you a few minutes," the technician said, stepping out. They sat in silence, the weight of shared parenthood settling between them. "I didn't think it would feel like this," Cameron said finally. "Like what?" "Like I was seeing a miracle." Lena's expression softened slightly. "It is a miracle. Life always is." "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but necessary. "For leaving. For making you handle this alone. For making you question whether you mattered." She was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you leave?" "Because I was terrified," he admitted. "Not of you, not of what we'd done. I was terrified of what it meant. Of how it made me feel." "How did it make you feel?" He struggled with the words. "Like I was human. Like I was vulnerable. Like I needed you in ways I couldn't control. And that scared you." "It terrified me," he said. "I've spent my whole life building walls, maintaining control. And in one night, you showed me how meaningless all of that was." Lena sat up, adjusting her gown. "So you ran." "I ran," he confirmed. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life." She studied his face, searching for something. "What do you want, Cameron? Really want?" "I want to be the man you deserve," he said without hesitation. "I want to be the father our child deserves. I want to show up, not just physically but emotionally. I want to earn back your trust." "Trust isn't something you earn back," she said quietly. "It's something you build. Day by day, choice by choice." "Then let me build it." She was quiet, considering. "I have conditions." "Anything." "You don't get to run again. When things get hard, when you're scared, when you don't know what to do, you stay. You talk to me. You work through it. I promise. You don't get to make decisions about this baby without me. We're partners in this, whether we're together or not." "Agreed." "And you don't get to treat me like I'm fragile or incapable. I'm strong enough to handle whatever comes." "I know you are," he said. "I've always known." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we try again. But this time we do it right." Cameron felt something ease in his chest. Not relief, he knew he hadn't earned that yet. But hope. Fragile, terrifying hope. "What does right look like?" he asked. "Honest," she said. "Present." She asked, and he heard the challenge in her voice. "Because I won't give you another chance to break me." "I don't want another chance," he said. "I want to spend the rest of my life proving you only needed to give me one." One Sunday afternoon she found him on the back porch, sitting in the same chair her mother used to polish every summer. He was holding a box. She paused. "What's that?" He stood slowly, eyes serious but kind. "Something that belonged to my mother," he said. "She left it in the attic. It was labeled, 'For the woman he loves.' I thought it was for my future wife, but now I think maybe it's for the woman I almost lost." He opened the box. Inside, a ring. Not diamonds. Not gold. A simple silver band engraved inside with the words, "Come home and mean it." He looked at Lena. "I didn't ask you to carry my child because I was desperate. I asked because you're the only person I've ever trusted to hold something I couldn't control. She swallowed. I've spent my life making people follow my lead. You were the first person who walked away when I didn't deserve you. And now I'm asking, he knelt, but not with the ring yet, if you'll let me come home. Lena's eyes glistened. What does home look like to you now? He smiled softly. You. This child. And a lifetime of earning what you gave me freely. She didn't rush. Didn't say yes immediately. She stepped forward, placed her hand on his shoulder and whispered, then stand up. And stay. He did. And this time he never left again. Sometimes, love doesn't come in grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes, it arrives through broken silences, second chances, and the courage to stay. What would you have done if you were Lena? Would you have let him back in? Let us know in the comments. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, heartfelt tales that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Thank you for watching.